Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Richardson, and I'm the Director of Intelligence and Child Safety with the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. And I would like to thank each of you for joining today, our second annual Child Safety Symposium. And with me today, I'm delighted to introduce our friend, Austin Berrier. Austin is a 20-year veteran of Homeland Security investigations, the last 13 of which have been spent with the Internet Crimes Against Children Division. Austin's work has led to the arrest of 300 online child predators and has helped result in the identification of 100 child victims. In addition, it's important that I note Austin is also a loving father of 5 boys and more recently the grandfather of 2. So he comes to us today with expertise from his time and many years in the field, but he also comes from the perspective of a loving, caring parent. Austin, thank you for joining us today.
Matt, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here today. I enjoy having opportunities such as this to share information with different parts of society and different groups about how we can keep our children and our loved ones and the youth safe online. So again, thank you for this opportunity.
Pleasure is all ours. And Austin, I've got a burning question because this comes up with me a lot in my work as well. Parents often ask me, parents and caring adults, a lot of the time, how do I keep up with the apps and the technologies and the games? And it seems, at least to me, I'm looking forward to your response. Perhaps sometimes we are spending a disproportionate amount of our time and energy and bandwidth worrying about the tech when many of us aren't tech experts. But really, what I'm wondering is Austin, is our attention best paid to the technologies, or is there a better way?
Matt, that's a fantastic question. And, the answer is, it's a little bit complex. I think for, again, parents and caring adults to show concern is great. And oftentimes the way this manifests is something's in the news or they hear about something in the community or from a friend where something bad happens, right? Maybe it's technology, maybe it's something else. And that normal knee-jerk parent response is to figure out how we're going to fix that issue right then and there because that's the issue in front of them, right? Not realizing that the underlying issue is the key. So when we talk about technology and children and their use of technology, if we look back over 20 years, or the 13 years I've been doing these crime types, children and child abusers and child predators, it started with things like simply email, right? Or basic file sharing type stuff. We moved forward to gaming platforms and social media. And now it's into live streaming and self-generated content. And then we're even starting to see stuff with AI generated content now, right? But the underlying part of that is the way when children are being victimized or being targeted online, it doesn't matter the platform, but their response, how their behavior changes. That's the key, right? Long before technology was in the hands of our children, kids were being victimized, whether it was by a uncle or a creepy dad or creepy adult, or maybe they were just simply being bullied at school, right? So if we focus on our child's behavior, understanding what their baseline is, what their norm is as a parent, who knows our kids better than us, right? The parents or the caregivers. And then paying attention when something changes. And that is tricky. I mean, we have as children enter puberty, or maybe there's other stressors in life like divorce or school. But again, being engaged with our kids is the most important thing, I feel.
Oh my goodness. And I think actually it's complex, but there's a lot of good news in here. Maybe I'll start with this. It seems maybe that parents know a lot more than they're giving themselves credit for. We might not know how TikTok filters work, nor do we have to, from what I'm hearing, but we sure know our kids and we know what predatory or unusual behaviors look like with adults in our personal lives. Is it fair to say maybe that parents ought to maybe give themselves a bit of credit and focus that lens on what is actually there and present in front of them if they're paying attention?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a good statement or a correct statement, right? I mean, when engaged parents, when little Johnny or little Susie has a bad day at school and they come home and they're they're kind of moping or they're kicking a rock and their head's kind of down, right? They notice that, when they say, well, what happened? What's going on? Or if they struggle at, sports or something, we recognize when our kids are not, you know, their normal happy selves. So just understanding that that doesn't just apply to face to face or in person relationships. That can happen nowadays even more often online, right? Children can be bullied or targeted 24 hours a day from around the world. It used to be that person had to be, had to be co-located with them. They had to share the same space, right? Now I can bully you or victimize you from the other side of the planet, right? So, I mean, there was even an investigation a couple years ago where an astronaut on the International Space Station was cyber stalking her ex. So, if an astronaut can cyber stalk somebody from space, your child can be certainly victimized or harassed or targeted from across state lines.
So literally, that's a fascinating. I wasn't aware of that case, but it really does do a really good job of exclamating the point there. And I guess, as parents, it's sort of, I agree that the challenge in that is that unlike the days prior to the technology, where the world that our kids lived in was really the one we defined for it. But now once they hit online, they're out there and they're out there real fast, which I guess underscores the importance of the dinner room or the dinner time around the table conversations, talking on the way to and from sports practice, looking for cues that something, could maybe not be quite right. One question I get quite a bit about is parents that are, rightfully so, understandably so, freaked out because they discover their children have generated child sexual abuse material or CSAM on their devices. Is that a trend that we're seeing increase? And part two would be, do you have any real good tips on what as parents that we can do to help prevent that?
Yes, absolutely. This is something that we're seeing increasing. There's varying studies by both government agencies and non-government agencies and academic organizations, with a bunch of different numbers of the percentage. And I'll be honest, I 100% don't know the actual percentage rate of increase. What I can say is in my personal online investigative work and the stuff that I do, I 100% absolutely have seen a significant increase in self-generated content. And there's a number of factors, right? The first factor is, in my opinion, uh, is the abundance of inexpensive, relatively speaking, smartphones, right? When I give safety talks, I ask people, does anybody here own a, Hollywood quality movie production studio with special effects and an interstellar communication device? And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I hold up my phone. I said, well, if you have one of these, you do. So how common high quality phones have become, the increase in fifth generation 5G or high speed internet, both at home and mobile networks, has allowed greater communication. The explosion in live stream technology, pick your poison. There's some big names today that we hear about, like TikTok or OnlyFans or what have you. Those are ones that happen to be in the news today, but in 6 months it'll be something different. But that kind of technology, COVID definitely had something to do with it. Children were home alone looking for things to do, right? But we've definitely seen an explosion because children have now the ability to, before, when they were being groomed, maybe it was to have a conversation or maybe take a still picture. But now with this ability to live stream, that happens, and I don't pretend to be a child developmental specialist, but I am a dad and a grandpa. Little kids don't understand long-term consequences. They can't think back past the end of the day or past lunch, or next week is a long time away. So they don't understand that the things that they do have consequences. Little children don't necessarily understand, their innocence, right? They're not inherently sexualized, so they don't understand that their bodies are being sexualized, right? I mean, every one of my kids at some point has jumped out of the tub or of the shower as a little one and run around and smack their butt and, be a silly little kid, right? That's normal, but adults, use that and sexualize it, right? But there's been a significant increase. And one of the things that I think is also underrepresented or not even thought about is I think is that we often think this is a problem where it's almost exclusively girls or young females, but there's definitely a significant portion of young boys. The way they are targeted and groomed is different, in my opinion, than girls. But there's a significant number of young boys out there. I think it's just underreported, maybe due to boys maybe being more embarrassed, or maybe some cultural norms or societal thoughts around maybe boys being sexually active and stuff like that.
Oh, and a point that I'd love to dovetail on is a lot of what we're talking about right now. So parents will often ask me, why would they ever do that? But I go, hang on. I have yet to do this in an audience without getting a snicker and a hand up. How many of you out there, if you're going to be fair and true, are glad that you didn't come of age with social media and technology? I grew up in the 80s and 90s. My mistakes stayed there. I didn't have a permanent record of everything I ever did. And when we look at what happens, the grooming with the boys and girls, going to the boys that you mentioned, we're seeing upticks there. It's different. The uptick in sextortion attempts, usually catfishing, which is where someone will masquerade to be, let's say, an attractive young female and entice a young boy or a young teen to send nudes, only to counter with demands and threats for money. And we're seeing, unfortunately, a number of suicides and really adverse outcomes. Is it fair maybe to say, try to put yourself into the shoes of that kid? Would you be enticed by such a thing? Maybe you can help better understand it. And is there anything that we want to say to those kids about what they might encounter? Let's look at the boys. Like, what would you say to a boy? They're 13 and they're online, and you want to prepare them for, let's say, a sextortion attempt, catfishing attempt. Any advice on what you might do or how you might put that out there, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic question. I mean, and you hit on an important part. Um, Kids, young people becoming sexually curious with their own bodies and the bodies of others has this is nothing new. Like you said, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, and for me it was somebody found dad's stash of Playboy magazines, and everybody came over and you looked at them, but you could only go as far as what was in between the covers, right? That was it. Once you got to the last page, that was it. There was no other hole to go down, right? There weren't these rabbit holes that could take you places. And even today, we do speak to our children about stranger danger, the idea of in-person stranger danger, right? Don't if somebody offers you candy or puppies from the van, you don't get in. So people understand that, right? But kids or people, even just regular people, they feel there's just I'm at home, I'm safe, right? I'm on my sofa, I'm in my bedroom, I'm in the bathroom, so I feel safe. But with the boys, what we're seeing is, men and women, have sexual urges, and those things start manifesting, in puberty. So you have kids that are just curious. And there's a number of child developmental um, uh, professionals or researchers out there who talk about how, sexual curiosity manifests before um, the decision making ability doesn't catch up, is lagging behind, right? I mean, we all had raging hormones at one point in time, and it's all about right now, right now, right now, instant gratification. So I think you're not going to ever get youth to stop being sexually curious and or experimental. They're just going to use whatever is at hand, whether it's magazines, whether it's black and white stag films from the 50s, or whether it's technologically supported. You have to change their um, their behavior towards it, understanding that one, there are people out there who want to take advantage of you. Two, there's a really good chance that no matter what you do, you will be victimized in some way in life. And then three, if that happens, not to be silent or suffer in silence, but you have to come forward. And for parents or the adult caregivers, like you said, think back to when you were a kid. And if your mom or your dad caught you fooling around in the backseat of a car or looking at a Playboy magazine, did you feel ashamed and how did you feel? So, or do you want your child to be able to come to you and say, look, I did this, I need help, right? I mean, as caregivers, we want our children to feel safe coming to us so we can fix those problems. If that child thinks they're going to be yelled at and grounded and have their phone smashed and be not allowed to talk to their friends, then they're not going to come forward. I'm not saying there should be no repercussions, but maybe it's not like, what do we call it, the nuclear option. Maybe you don't go all the way to like DEFCON 37, right? Let's get them safe first, and then we can work on the behavior afterwards, right?
Wonderful response, and it brings to mind one of the things that comes to mind for me is that we're all going to make mistakes. And our kids need to know that they can come to us. It's not if they're going to make them, it's when. And understanding that it's okay to make mistakes. We don't have to keep making them. And like you said, don't go thermonuclear right away. As far as I understand it, one of the main reasons kids will not disclose a problem is fear of being blamed and having their technology taken away. And we don't want that on the table. So I feel like, hey, look, I made mistakes. You're going to make them. It's not if, it's when. It's what we do about it. And if we learn from them and become safer and better people, then it's really not a waste of time. That's one way people learn. So I really love that answer because I hear that a lot or I teach students that are of that age group. Why wouldn't you go? Well, I don't want to get blamed and I don't want to lose my snap streak, my rewards on my thing. So make them safe first, unpack, and figure out next steps after. I love the advice, Austin. That's super relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. If I try, what I try to do with my kids is, I try to, age appropriately, give them as much information on the front end and be honest, right? There are, especially in this space, my youngest, even when my children were very young, look, there are people out there who want to hurt you. And again, now you have to have the age appropriate. Those parents know their kids best and what their kids will understand. But don't tell them, oh, it's all puppy dogs and butterflies and rose-colored glasses. Be honest with them and then give them so they can make informed decisions. So now if they understand that there's people out there, like so, children don't generally children know when they're walking to and from school or riding their bikes or they're at the playground not to talk to strangers because we tell them strangers, stranger danger. But we don't have that conversation online. We still as a society are focusing on in person. And technology is everywhere, right? I mean, my oven is Bluetooth for goodness sakes, right? But we aren't prepared. We haven't caught up, right? So, I mean, Skynet is here type of thing, right? So that's a reference for some folks who might not get it. But but that's the thing. We unleash technology upon our children and they're woefully ill prepared to handle it, right? And another thing that we can dive into is for me is, children model behavior. If they come home and mom and dad or parents or whoever are sitting on the phone doing their thing, whether it's playing a game, flirting online, doing their social media, but if the important adults in their life are faces buried in technology, well, what are the kids going to do? Right? Kids model behavior. Kids, contrary to what they're going to say to your face, kids want love and affection and structure. And when I was a kid, right, if you didn't get it at home, you went out and you ran with the wrong crowd, right? Like the outsiders, right? You went on the wrong side of the tracks, you smoked cigarettes, and you wore a leather jacket. Now you can do it while mom's sitting at the other end of the sofa, and she's doing her thing on social media, and dad's doing online gaming, and Big Brother's talking to his girlfriend. So little Susie, she has no one to talk to. She's going to go online looking for validation, for love, for affection, and that's what the predators do. They know that if they can provide what those children are not getting at home, that's the end. And it's not food, it's not clothes necessarily, it's love, affection, and attention, right? Humans are social creatures. If we're not getting it in that relationship we're in, we're going to go find it elsewhere. And that happens with children. That is the crux, that is the nitty gritty, that's the foundation of grooming is providing that child some if something they don't have, fulfilling that need that's not being fulfilled at home.
All the core human needs, and all people need love, affection, and attention, recognition when we do good things. I love the point because again, if as parents we put ourselves in those shoes, um, if no one paid attention, complimented us, asked us about our day, no one gave a, cared if we were there or not, how tempting would it be to have somebody meet those needs, online or not? And the advice there on that, if we're switched off and not engaged and not listening and not engaging, we would go and seek it too. I think we lose sight of that, Austin, sometimes. I'm guilty too, by the way. I have days where I'm on my phone too much. I have my little strategies I've been putting on my nightstand so I'm not looking at it every second I get bored. Um, but now, just one more thing about the modeling, like when we model behavior, to me, it's been entirely commonplace where sometimes the kids are not the weak links in the home. It's the parents that overshare on social media. Pictures that shouldn't be shared, hashtags that aren't really super good ones to use, um, information that could lead to personal details that could be used to groom us, our locations. Do you feel that's a commonplace thing? I think it's called sharing or oversharing.
Yeah, I think, that's one of the phenomena of social media, right? Like, if we're posting things or not posting things, getting likes, I mean, we're all guilty of it. I have professional social media and personal social media, and you put something out there because you want to stimulate conversation or elicit a response or generate some for whatever purpose. And when it doesn't happen, you're sad, right? So maybe we make decisions or we do things differently. But definitely the oversharing can be a concern. And that's just basic safety. I mean, your social media needs to be locked down. I mean, it should be locked down, right? In the sense that for any number of reasons, to protect your children, to protect your personal safety. You don't want to be out there telling people like, "Hey, this is where I live," and oh, by the way, my house is empty because we're in Tahiti. Come rob me, right? Um, because we want to show the fun parts of our life, but you can be smart about it. Oftentimes when uh, predators groom children, right? They'll initiate a conversation, they'll start feeling that need at some point, and this is very general, right? At some point, they'll get that child into a compromising circumstance. It could be the child shares something or says something. The child could maybe, do some minor nudity, show their bum, or maybe just even they just take off, they just dance in their underwear, something that's the child feels compromised, right? That they're embarrassed of. Meanwhile, that predator has been doing research on your kid. Maybe they're taking, they're taking mental note of things the kid has said. They're looking in the background. There's a yearbook or there's a cheerleading outfit they can figure out. Or maybe they find that kid social media and they figure out where they go to school, or maybe they find them through mom's social media as well, right? And then they have that hook, that embarrassing activity, and they have the ability to extort or sextort that child. If you don't do X, I will tell everybody about Y, what you just did, right? And believe it or not, and this is, just equally creepy, that those that have a sexual interest in children, it's, we those in the business know that a vast amount of the content out there is just horrible, horrible, graphically terrible stuff. But the predators also collect content that is just regular old pictures off of the internet, right? I mean, if you think, again, when we were young, if the old Tiger Beat magazine, right? Girls or boys would like, it was Heather Thomas or New Kids on the Block or whoever it was, and they put pictures on their wall and they cut pictures out and put it in, in scrapbooks. And those weren't illegal. They were just pictures of people they liked. Well, we get into offenders' devices or into their computers, and parts of their collection oftentimes are just otherwise mundane images, right? Because they think that kid's cute. This whole, this whole concept of, social media influencers, but there's a surprising number of parents out there who have whole social media profiles built around their children, right? Like that the dance mom craze kind of thing, right? Putting their kids out there, and that puts your children at risk. They are um, are your child should be your greatest concern, and that's it's our greatest resource, right? We have to protect it. Our kids.
100%. And I'll add one note because I'm probably not alone in my thinking on this, but I'm a 44-year-old guy. I don't feel, other than financial scams, no one's going to target me for anything sexual in nature. Ergo, some men act bulletproof, like this doesn't apply to them. But the way I look at it, so as you mentioned earlier, if I'm away on a business trip and I'm really excited, I don't do that many of them. They're highlight reels for me. I want to share that, but I don't share it while I'm in any town, USA, on a trip from Canada where I live, because then I've told the whole world that I'm not home. My wife's home with my two little boys, and I'm out. So I've exposed them to those types of risks. So what I tend to do is I share that, but I share it when I'm already home 3 days later. I had a great time in Anytown, USA, thanks to the hospitality. So it's an easy one. You can still share those moments, but what I advise people is do them in the past tense. Like I have already done it. Uh, with the going to the sharing part, just one more on that. With my kids, really early on, and it goes back to what you were saying about their own confidence and healthy relationships and their identity. Very early with mine, I instilled the value that their likeness is theirs and theirs alone. So if I take a picture of my kids and I want to post it, I ask them if I can. And is the picture okay? And if they don't give me the green light, it doesn't happen. So they do know they have full ownership of their identities online and what's being shared. As you said too, modeling the behavior. My kids, they look at my social media. I do try to lead by example. I'm not sure I'm perfect, but if I ask them to do it, I'm not going to ask them to do anything I don't do as well, as what I'm trying to say. Um, where how the technology, Austin, I'm dying to ask this. I've never had a great answer in my mind. So let's see. The technology ever shifts. Different games, different apps. Now and like you said, we're using Leave It to Beaver era safety tips in the AI age, and it ain't working. One thing I ponder is there a way to harden the targets? And I see two of them. I see parents, you too can be groomed, and the kids themselves that transcend the technology. Because my belief is probably a lot of the stuff we saw in the old ICQ back in the late 90s is probably happening a lot the same way, just on newer platforms. But I'd love to know what you think, how can we really harden the targets ourselves as a family unit and our children?
I think simple, you can take those Leave It to Beaver rules and apply them today. You just have to be smart about it, right? We told kids in the old days, don't talk to strangers. Well, just don't talk to strangers on the internet. It really is as simple as that. If you don't know who like if you're a child or an adult and someone says, "Hey, I know you," or I know you through this person or that person, close your eyes and try to vision them. And if you cannot see them in your mind's eye, you probably don't know them. You probably shouldn't be sharing a lot of information. Like again, like on like professional social media, LinkedIn, right? Like I get all kind of um, hey, let's be LinkedIn people. When I look at this person, like that is 100% a fake photo. And oh, by the way, we have no shared friends, right? So probably not today, KGB, right? But the same kind of thing happens with the children. Is like if you don't know these kids, just because you quote know somebody online, um, doesn't mean you know them, right? I think that's the first thing. Is give them that common sense. Look, if you don't know Johnny or Susie or Bobby like from the playground or from school, let's just presume you don't know them. Okay. With our parents or with the adults, that same thing happens too. Um, there's a lot of folks out there as adults who have risky online, social media behavior, and and by that they open their children up. And I don't, I can groom your child or I can groom you by befriending you online and realizing that you have kids. And that doesn't mean, again, people think that means I'm going to show up at your house, with duct tape and zip ties, and Liam Neeson's going to have to come and rescue you with a certain set of skills. That's not the reality. All I need is to cross that digital threshold, right? And once I'm across that digital threshold onto your digital curtilage, then that's even worse, right? Because if I knock on your door and I'm a creep, you're gonna call the cops, hopefully, and lock the door. But if I'm, it's far more insidious when we come across the through the ones and zeros, right? And I think that's we have to understand that. I tell you see youth and adults both taking these absurd, ridiculous online um, surveys. Answer these 6 questions to figure out what Disney princess you are, or answer these 5 questions to figure out what kind of potato you are, or whatever. And those questions happen to be about, what town you live in, what's your astrological sign, your favorite color, the first person they ask you all these questions, and that information can be used to, like, build a social profile on you, maybe for grooming. Some of those questions absolutely match like your security questions on your credit card and your banking institutions, and then you wonder why you've been hacked or whatever. But those are all questions used to social engineer you. I mean, be, that's a whole nother thing that we could talk about. But that's one thing. It's just be smart online. If someone's asking you questions and you can't picture them in your head, don't talk to them. You know, it's very easy. You just close your you used to say close your laptop. Kids aren't on laptops anymore. Just exit the app, put the phone down, right? Because they can only reach through that device. They can only reach through the internet and grab you if you let them. The power is in the hands of the children and the parents, but they don't realize that, right? It's as simple as just log off. If you don't feel safe, log off. But I think parents have to have honest conversations with their kids. It has to be honest. There are people out there who want to hurt children, absolutely, and it's not, international cabals with Lear jets and yachts and secret flights. It's a creepy guy in his basement or in his mom's basement, with a bunch of internet access and the gift of gab. He has the ability to talk, right? And they're smooth talkers, and that's it. Your child can be abused, they can be sextorted, they can be victimized while you're sitting next to each other on a sofa, on Friday night movie night while you're eating pizza. It's that's the reality. It doesn't need to happen, like I said, with kidnappings and duct tape. It's gonna happen sitting on the sofa.
Uh, I'm hearing it's far less sensational than some of the horror stories we see in the media or some of us grew up with as 70s and 80s and 90s, kids. But that doesn't make it better because it is so insidious. It means we have to be on a heightened guard. I look at it almost like with mine, I say, if you wouldn't say it or do it offline on the street, then you do not do it online. And that fixes a lot of problems. I've seen in discussions with predators and threat actors where they say if only people take so many risks online they never would offline, and they're thankful for that. So if we can fix the paradigm of thinking, we could probably fix a lot of stuff in there. And it really occurs to me, you know how when we're on the street, you can tell if someone's staring at you, or they stand too close, or they're following, or they're breathing heavy, and you get the creep out vibe or the butterflies in the stomach or inside alarm clock. I think maybe, and I'd love your opinion here, because that doesn't really work online. We're sensory deprived. Our instincts that we've been given to protect us aren't going to work the same. We're through a screen that gives a false sense of security. There is no physical cues. So it's hard. I don't have the answers, but it's almost like you have to do more thinking because your instincts aren't necessarily there for you. Do you think there's some merit to that?
Yeah, I think that's a fan. I've never thought of that either, and I think that's a fantastic point of view. You're right. Whatever your theories or views are on, how modern humanity developed, we certainly would 100% have built-in protections, right? Spidey sense, whatever you want to call it. And you're right, and it's the whole idea of social media is carrot or stick, right? You do something and you get gratification through likes, hearts, whatever it is. That's very basic Pavlovian behavior. So, you now you have conflicting um, baseline, like you said, you have like the fight or flight on one side, right? That would should be protecting you. On the other side, you have like these basic, right, Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of stuff, this very basic needs. But in real life, your hopefully your instincts are going to kick in and say, that risk isn't worth it for that gratification. But you're right, online, because we have that sensation of safety. We there's the joke of the internet tough guy or the keyboard commando, right? The guy who can talk tough or act tough on whatever internet space because he doesn't have to say it in person, right? And I think that translates. I think you're fan. I've told my kids, if you wouldn't say or do that in front of your grandmother, you don't need to say it or do it online, right? Would you talk to your grandmother that way? Then you don't need to say that, out online. And that because there is no filter or there's no, people feel safe from repercussions. And that's why you see online bullying amongst children. That's why you see all the just, absolutely ridiculous, commentary or hate speech or whatever that you see online because people feel safe. And the difference is we know that's not the case, whether somebody's doxxed, on traditional adult type stupidity, or whether they're children that are targeted. But I think, parents too have to realize that um, if they're like, and this is a big thing for me in our house, no devices at the table when we're eating dinner. We try to have family dinner where we sit down and talk about the day, a couple times a week. We try to have some family game nights. If you're going to have a family movie night means family movie night. It doesn't mean family sit on a couch, everybody on their device doing their own thing, ignoring the movie nights. One of my little blurbs I like to say is unplug and engage, right? My family and I, we go to Southern California to the amusement parks a lot. And it just baffles me when you're at the happiest place on earth and everybody's in line on their phone. um, there was a day where, my kids all know how to do thumb wrestling. Do you know why they know how to do thumb wrestling? Because if we're standing in line, they're not on their phone. We're thumb wrestling. You know, people look at us like we're crazy, but you know what? My kids, I think, are healthy and they're and they have a good sense of self worth. And there's probably some science behind this, um, but this is just my experience. When I deal with child victims, the kids that have been victimized, and this is just my observations, the more engaged and active and emotionally and socially healthy and involved the child is, they are far less likely to be victimized. And what I mean is this: first and foremost, if that kid is, playing sports, doing dance and scouts and church group, choir, whatever, if they're busy, they're just busy and they don't have a lot of time to be careless on the internet. Two, if they feel good about themselves, if they have confidence, if they have self-worth, they're more likely to not, look for that love or gratification or whatever it is online because they're complete as themselves. They're not looking for somebody else to complete that, right? Or to give them validation, right? So, it's sort of like when we were children, like you would always worry about the kid who was the wallflower, who was socially maybe didn't hang out with the other kids, who was quiet, wasn't engaged. They were the ones that maybe would have some kind of, concerns or issues because they weren't mentally and emotionally in a good place. So, getting your kids engaged and stuff, it doesn't have to be, you know, they're the star quarterback. Like I said, it could be just something as simple as they're in drama club or they're doing scouting or just something, right? If their first thing is to wake up in the morning and jump on a device, that's a problem. They should want to go outside and play or go see a friend or do something, right? But instead of when we were kids, right, the TV was the crutch, right? Flop down and watch Bugs Bunny. But you can only go as far as Bugs Bunny. We have to stop as parents, we have to stop using mobile devices and tech as a crutch for childcare. And that's Austin the parent, not Austin the cop. Um, but again, that makes for healthier kids, right? More resilient kids.
That's wonderful advice, actually, from both a law enforcement and a father perspective, in my humble opinion. Because I love the way you're bringing this right down to the simple common denominators. If you're on here today, you are a person that's able to do this. You're probably winning because you care enough to be here. Um, what we've said there, by the way, about COVID, we certainly saw an increased reliance on technology. All of us did. How we shop, date, certainly how we work and learn. If during COVID, if you're carrying guilt, I had to do this too myself. I'm working from home. My wife was still going to her office. I have two kids, and I had a really busy work life. And yeah, I too had to rely on a bit of help with those devices. We're through it. We needn't carry the guilt. We can start doing better now, and myself included. Full disclosure, I've had to retrain myself a little bit to set the right path as you described. Our kids won't necessarily get up and go, "Hey, good morning, Dad. I'm gonna go outside and catch frogs." We might have to be the impetus to go put the thing down. Come on, we're gonna go hit a fishing hole. But if we need to do that, we do it. It's wonderful advice. It is. You said earlier, leave the Berrier still applies because it's kind of what's old's new, isn't it? Austin, we're coming up on time, and I'm dying to ask you one question. I know we're all wanting to hear this. Despite our best efforts, sometimes things don't go our way, and we might find our kids are endangered. They're being stalked, harassed, sextorted. We witness what we believe to be grooming behavior. Possibly they're sending self-generated images themselves. Sometimes we do our best and we still need some help. If a family were to require and need law enforcement intervention and assistance, do you have any advice for how a family can come in and be ready for a productive conversation report with law enforcement?
Yes, absolutely. First things first, if your child comes to you, believe them. This is not a normal thing for kids to make up, right? So it's just first things, believe them, save the judgment and anger for later, and realize that that judgment and anger should not be directed at your child. It should be directed at the predator. That's the first thing. Two, please, please, please do not engage the person that they're talking to. I understand as a father the desire to go, papa bear or mama bear and protect your young. Resist that urge because that makes our job more difficult. It's the easiest thing to do is simply just to ignore that offender and get into law enforcement as soon as possible, wherever you are, right? If you call, 911 or 999, whatever it is in your country, oftentimes you're going to have a patrol officer who comes out and takes an initial report, and it's going to end up being turned over to a detective or a specialist. Understand that that's probably how it's going to happen. Another option is if you have that ability is to go into the station, right? Your chances of getting a specialist by going to the station are probably a little bit better than that specialist coming out to you because they're working investigations. Save that device, especially if it's a mobile device. You can turn it into airplane mode, so any evidence on it is maintained. Try to keep it from being powered off. Make sure it's unlocked, and that makes our job easier to extract evidence. And understand that's what's going to happen, right? That's the first things first, right? But please, contact law enforcement as soon as possible and resist that urge because the way a lot of technology works today, and a lot of these apps and a lot of the spaces on the internet where the offenders are, if they at any point feel that they've been compromised, they can oftentimes clear their tracks. They can destroy evidence or turn that, make that evidence disappear, not just from their devices, but maybe from your child's device. And the other thing too is a lot of folks are like, well, I just want this to go away. I just want this to end. Understand this. Your child is not, first of all, is not the only kid this has happened to. And they're probably not that offender's only victim. And they're probably not even their first victim. If only some other child had the strength or another set of parents had come forward, maybe your kid would not have been victimized. So realize that you're not just saving your kid, you're saving all the victims that could come after you. For every child that is strong enough to come forward, we don't know if there's tens or 20s or dozens maybe who don't have that strength. So you're not just saving one kid, you're saving many.
Wonderful advice, because if this happens, it can be really easy to think there's absolutely nothing that can come of this that will even have the appearance of a silver lining or a learning moment. But back into what you just said there, those that have the strength and grace to resist urge to contact the offender and go papa or mama bear. Nothing good happens with that. And you won't deter or scare them. The one, like, as far as I know, that just doesn't work. But yeah, they might blow up all the evidence. Nothing good. But if you think on it and think, okay, this got contained, my child came to me, we fixed it. I love the way you say, think of the ones they currently have under them that are free now. Think of the ones that will never be victimized, and your family had the strength and grace to overcome it. It wasn't for nothing. I think that's such a wonderful, wonderful lesson and way to kind of bring us to a close today. I do want to say, as a father myself and being involved in the lane a bit in the space, I learned a lot today. I always do from you. One more thing. I remember a long time ago you told me this, and it's a family rule now. Um, One of the easiest things that we can do as well is the devices being used in the public common areas of the home, or if in a bedroom the door's open and you are aware of what's transpiring, you can come and go. Keeping those devices out of bathrooms. It was you that told me there's no reason for that thing to ever be in there. That's a hard and fast rule. We don't even fight about it at my house. But those, along with your tips and how to encounter, if we encounter this despite our best efforts, there is hope, and there's certainly help out there, and how we go about that have been just amazing. Austin, on behalf of myself, the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, and our audience today, I just wish to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to make our families and our audience that much safer today. Austin, thank you.
Again, my pleasure. And just for the audience out there, know that you're not alone in this. If someone who's watching this today is a victim, you're not alone. There are people out there who are willing to help you. Just come forward. Thank you.
Thank you.